Those of you who followed my account of the voyages of Nathaniel Portlock will know of his close association with another Cook Voyages veteran, Captain James Colnett. Colnett was a fascinating character who became embroiled in one of the most strange near-war situations Britain and Spain were to face in the 18th century. He also spent more time in the Pacific than either Cook, Bligh or Portlock, completing 5 voyages to the far side of the world. My own introduction to Mr. Colnett came when Lieutenant Commander Andrew David of the Hydrographic Department first introduced me to his voyages of exploration. Colnett's was one of Andrew's core areas of academic interest, having sailed in the Pacific charting some of the very same islands he had visited during the Second World War. He showed me some of Colnett's original charts during a visit to Taunton. However, it was the novels of Patrick O'Brian which brought him back to my mind. O'Brian introduces him as one of Jack Aubrey's heroes in the novel Far Side of the World. It was this and his close connection with Mr. Portlock during my recent research that led me to examine his life more closely. James Colnett was born in Stoke Damerel, near Devonport, in Plymouth, in 1755. The son of another James Colnett, who originally came from Stepney, near London, and his wife Sarah Lang, who came from Portsmouth. James Colnett Sr. was a Navy man, and the two of them had married in Portsmouth in 1748. James was their third child, and there was to follow one more son before their father's death in the West Indies during the 7 Years' War, while on active service as master of HMS Salisbury. His father's will was written in Jamaica very shortly before his untimely death. Our subject was brought up by his mother with the support of a relative named John Bimner, who was a ship's carpenter in the Navy. James himself entered the Navy on the 28th of June 1770, signing aboard a small 8-gun brig-rigged sloop named HMS Hazard. She had been built in Portsmouth back in 1749. He served as an able seaman or young gentleman under Commander James Orrock. She was stationed off the east coast of Scotland. Colnett was to remain on her until the 21st of August 1771, during which time he learned the ropes. Colnett's luck then comes in, as on the 4th of September 1771 he received orders to join the slightly larger 14-gun ship-rigged sloop HMS Scorpion at Deptford. Her captain was the newly promoted Commander James Cook, who had recently returned from his voyage on the Endeavour. The Scorpion was at that time being fitted out at Deptford Dockyard, and his service on board, along with that of the commander, was to be short-lived, as on the 28th of November 1771, Cook was transferred to HMS Resolution. He took Colnett with him, and he signed on board on the 10th of December. Resolution was a recently purchased Whitby-built merchantman, formerly named the Marquis of Granby. Purchased for £4,151 in November 1771, when just over a year old. She underwent conversion work at Deptford, largely as a result of alterations requested by Sir Joseph Banks. These were later removed upon his withdrawal from the expedition. This refit cost a further £10,080. The ship was 461 tons and 110 foot 8 inches on the deck, and she had 30 foot 5 inches on the beam. In company with 4 other midshipmen, including Henry Roberts and George Vancouver, the naturalist John Reinhold Forster and his son George, Cook, the great explorer, took them on his second voyage of discovery. A further naturalist, Anders Sparman, joined the ship in Cape Town on the outward journey. This time Cook was to travel in company with a second ship, the Adventure, under the command of Tobias Furneaux, who had sailed under Wallis on the Dolphin. Together the two ships would transit the Southern Ocean from 1772 to 1775, also visiting the delights of Tahiti and Easter Island, and putting other island groups on the map. Colnett is understood to have been credited as the first European to sight New Caledonia in September 1774, with Cook naming Cape Colnett and Mount Colnett after him. Furneaux and the Adventure became separated after a storm in October 1773 off New Zealand and headed home. Resolution, with Cook and Colnett still on board, from then on spent a further year and a half chartering the southern Pacific Ocean and circumnavigating the globe alone. On several of the island visits, the two ships were met with violence, particularly in the Friendly Islands. The images from the voyage were beautifully captured by the artist on board, William Hodges, whose paintings you see here. However, it was venturing below the Antarctic Circle and disproving of the fabled Great South Continent that were to be the biggest markers of the voyage. After returning home in July 1775, Colnett, lacking patronage to secure promotion, took on the post in home waters as gunner aboard the Richmond-class 12-pounder frigate HMS Juno under Captain Hugh Dalrymple. She had been built back in 1756. In January 1776, he accepted the position as master on board the very same vessel that had accompanied the Resolution to the Pacific, the Adventure. However, the position was not taxing on Colnett's navigational skills, as the ship was at that time acting as a store ship in the River Thames. Adventure, formerly the Marquis of Rockingham, was built in 1770 in Whitby. Of 336 tons and of 99 feet 3 inches on deck, she carried 10 4-pounder cannon. Colnett's commander for this short period was Lieutenant John Hallam. Colnett then takes his examination for lieutenant and was commissioned on the 22nd of February 1779. His first commissioned post was as 4th lieutenant on HMS Belle-Isle, a 64-gun third-rate. She was a captured East Indiaman, taken by HMS Hero under the command of George Edgecombe in April 1761. Originally built by Antoine Giraud in 1760 and named Libertine, Colnett was to sail with her to the East Indies. He returned to Britain in August 1781 when the ship was paid off. This ship is not to be confused with the Belle-Isle at Trafalgar. Our ship left the Navy list in 1784. However, she continued to live on until 1818, when she was broken up in Sheerness by John Beatson, who paid £2,730 for the vessel. On the 9th of February 1781, Colnett joins the Bienfaisant, 64 guns, under Captain John McBride. During the time the ship operated in the Channel Fleet, and he acted as the 3rd lieutenant. His vessel had been captured by Admiral Boscawen at the Battle of Louisbourg back in July 1758, and seems to have been a very well-designed ship. Her beautiful stern carvings are seen here. Of 1,360 tons and 153 feet 9 inches in the gun deck, with 26 24-pounders and 28 12-pounders as main armament, she had been designed by Jean Joffre and constructed in Brest Dockyard in 1758. She had a long career with the Navy, being finally broken up in 1814. While aboard, under a new commander, Captain Richard Braithwaite, Colnett also takes part in the relief of Gibraltar on the 12th of April 1781, and after promotion to 2nd Lieutenant on the 21st of April 1782, fought at the Battle of Dogger Bank under the command of Vice Admiral Hyde Parker. This took place on the 5th of August the same year. Here he may have met the young William Bligh, who was at that time master of the 32-gun frigate Belle-Poule. It was this beautiful French frigate that gifted the colours of the sinking Dutch ship the Holland to the victorious admiral after the battle. A short period of leave on half pay followed after the peace in September 1783, before Colnett was posted to the Portsmouth guard ship HMS Pégase, a 64-gun ship of the line, another recently captured French prize ship. She was under the command of Captain Samuel Marshall. Colnett was to remain on harbour duty until August 1786, rising to the rank of first lieutenant. Pégase was built in Brest in 1781. Her drafts show a beautifully elegant ship. She was captured by Captain John Jarvis, later Earl St Vincent, in the 80-gun Foudroyant back in 1782. Sadly, the damage sustained during the action meant that despite significant expenditure on refit costs, the vessel never returned to active fleet service. By 1801 she had become a prison ship in Rotten Row in Portsmouth, and she would be broken up in 1815. The 3 years of boredom, continually on guard duty, clearly did not suit Mr. Colnett, and hence he obtained from the Admiralty permission to take command of a commercial enterprise to trade sea otter pelts off the Pacific coast of North America. These had been found by the crew of Cook's third voyage to be worth a considerable sum in China during the return home. The company, led by Richard Cadman Etches, sought to profit by this, and so Colnett was invited to join the adventure. This is the very same company in which our last subject, Nathaniel Portlock, and George Dixon had already departed in newly built merchantmen, the ship-rigged King George and the Snow Queen Charlotte, to the Northwest Pacific a year earlier. Colnett was not to be so lucky with his choice of vessel, due to Etches facing something of a cash flow issue. He was to set sail in October 1786 aboard an elderly vessel called the Prince of Wales, a ship-rigged vessel of 250 tons that had been built back in 1752. His first mate was another naval lieutenant, Andrew Bracy Taylor, who also left a copy of his journal for posterity. They were joined by the naturalist Archibald Minges, who acted as a ship's surgeon. He was later to accompany Vancouver on his next voyage. The ship had a crew of just 35 men and was armed with 14 guns. In company with a smaller brig, the Princess Royal of 65 tons, and under Captain Charles Duncan, the two ships were to spend the next couple of years trading fur seal skins between Queen Charlotte Sound, the coast of Alaska, and Hawaii, with the intention of selling the skins in Canton. Colnett's salary for the voyage was £600 a year, far in excess of the £90 a year a lieutenant would make, which would have been more than halved when he was unemployed. Unlike Portlock and Dixon, Colnett and his accompanying brig, the Princess Royal, arrived in Queen Charlotte Sound in July 1787 and were able to complete a cargo far quicker, and with only one call at Hawaii. After just 2 years, they were able to head to Canton, where the skins were sold very profitably. In Canton, Colnett became associated with the fur trader John Mears, who had had a previous run-in with Portlock and Dixon while in Alaska, owing to him having been trading without a licence from the East India Company. Mears had been utilising a flag of convenience to shield his activities. Colnett had on board with him Richard Cadman Etch's younger brother, John, who was acting as a supercargo, and together Mears and Etches convinced Colnett to take on command of another voyage. Mears, like Colnett, was also a Royal Navy lieutenant on leave, and the plan was for Mears to act as the agent in Canton for the business, while Colnett was left in command of the ships. Colnett, Etches and Mears came to terms, and as the Prince of Wales had already been sent back to England with a tea cargo, under the command of Andrew Bracy Taylor, it was decided to purchase another brig, the Argonaut. The attempt was intended to open a trading post at Nootka Sound, on what is now known as Vancouver Island. Colnett and his support vessel, the Princess Royal, sailed from Macau across the northern Pacific, again to work in conjunction with Captain Douglas in the brig Iphigenia, and the Northwest America, a small schooner that had been built in Nootka the previous year by Mears. Colnett took with him 29 Chinese workers who would assist in building yet another support schooner. However, on arriving in the Sound, Colnett was promptly arrested. This took place on the 3rd of July 1789 as a result of a dispute with the leader of a Spanish expedition, Captain Don Esteban Yos Martinez. Captain Martinez was sailing with two Spanish ships, the 26-gun corvette La Princesa, built at San Blas, Mexico in 1778, and the storeship San Carlos, under the command of Gonzalo Lopez de Herrero. This famous incident became known as the Nootka Crisis and escalated into the Spanish armament of 1790, which nearly brought about war between Britain and Spain. Colnett and his fellow officers and crew were essentially treated as pirates and arrested. His ship and its trade goods and provisions were seized by the Spanish. Colnett appears to have become slightly unhinged by the affront and tried to jump out of the cabin window. However, he was restrained and thrown into an airless cabin, while the Spanish, aided by Colnett's treacherous boatswain, took the ship down to San Blas in Mexico. For a whole year, Colnett and his crew remained prisoners, watching their personal possessions being pillaged. Colnett's Arnold chronometer and fine Ramsden sextant were amongst the things taken while they rotted in jail in Mexico. However, without any support from the French, Spain had to back down, and in May 1790, Colnett was finally released, together with his ship, and some compensation was made financially by the Spanish. Colnett set about refitting the ship, which was in terrible condition, having been run aground on the entry to San Blas by the Spanish. And finally, in July 1790, the Argonaut, despite being short of provisions and trade goods, returned to a further period of trading in Canada and Alaska, before sailing back once again to Canton with a full cargo of 1,200 skins. Colnett's bad luck sadly continued when Canton was found to be closed to the British. As a result, they could not sell the skins there. Instead, the Argonauts sailed to Japan in an attempt to sell some of the skins amongst the islands. They were the first British ships to do so, but were not particularly successful. Instead, they headed to North China, where a few more skins were sold. However, after they were caught in a typhoon off the coast of Korea, the ship's rudder became badly damaged, and the ship had to return to Macau, where they decided to sell the ship a virtual wreck. In April 1792, Colnett returned to England aboard the East Indiaman, the 755-ton General Coote, that had been built back in Rotherhithe in 1781. The ship, under Captain James Baldwin, was also carrying the remaining skins, which were successfully sold to the East India Company for a substantial profit. They paid £9,760 for them, more than twice the original cost of the Argonaut. Returning home, Colnett then entered into negotiations with the Admiralty to undertake yet another voyage back to the Pacific, this time to seek to identify suitable harbours and anchorages where British whalers could refit their vessels. A joint venture was agreed to, and between January 1793 and November 1794, Colnett commanded the sloop Rattler in a joint venture with the London whaling company Samuel Enderby and Sons. The latter operated a fleet of around 68 whalers, operating in the southern fisheries at the time, and had first ventured into the South Pacific in 1788 with the 250-ton whaler Amelia. The lack of safe revictualling locations, particularly during the period of worsening relations with the Spanish, made it important to locate and chart safe anchorages where ships with small crews could refit and provision. Colnett's wages were set at just £500 a year, a substantial pay cut. However, to increase his earnings, he took a 50% ownership stake in the vessel, entitling him to an equal share of any profits from the voyage. Rattler herself was the former Echo-class 16-gun 6-pounder ship-rigged sloop of war built for the Navy in 1783 by Francis Wilson in Sandgate in Kent, to a design by Edward Hunt. You can see her plans here. She was 341 tons and 101 feet on the gun deck, and was 27 feet 9 inches in the beam. She undertook major refitting and modifications at the yard of John Perry in Blackwall to convert her into a whaler and make her workable by a small merchant crew. Rattler sailed in November 1792 with a crew of just 29 men, compared to her normal service crew of 125. She was only armed with 3 3-pounder guns, and hence had plenty of space for oil and provisions on board. During the course of the voyage on the Rattler, Colnett called at Rio de Janeiro, where he met with Lieutenant John Ralph Moss, who has been the subject of much research by Admiral Michael Harris recently. He too was in command of a Samuel Enderby whaler, named the William at the time. Rattler rounded Cape Horn, visited Chile and the Gulf of Mexico and the Galapagos Islands, including discovering and charting Chatham and Hood Islands in the archipelago for the first time. The ship then proceeded on into the Gulf of California and along the coast of Panama, reprovisioning at the Cocos Islands, which Colnett described as being like a small version of Tahiti. The charts he produced are detailed and, like those of his tutor, Captain Cook, surprisingly accurate. The Rattler was only pursuing sperm whales, and hence most of the whale sightings proved disappointing. However, there are interesting discussions about the difficulties of chasing whales in a sailing ship, which were easily able to outrun the boats and the ship. He also reports the whale boats being dashed to pieces and stove in during their pursuit. However, the drawing that he later published of a young whale that was hauled aboard the ship is one of the earliest accurate drawings of a whale. Whaling was certainly a hard life, and one which increasingly required good fortune due to the rapid expansion of the whaling fleets of the United States and Great Britain. After returning home, the Revolutionary War with France was well underway. Colnett returned to the Royal Navy and was promoted commander on the 19th of December 1794. He was appointed to the 18-gun ship-rigged sloop HMS Merlin, built by King's Boatyard in Dover in 1780. She had a complement of 125 men and was armed with 18 6-pounder long guns. 4 months later, he transferred to another sloop, HMS Hawke, the Merlin having been found unfit for further service. She was sold at Sheerness in August 1795. Hawke was slightly smaller than the Merlin, being of 16 6-pounder guns, and at just 100 feet on deck and 27 feet 6 inches in the beam. Her tonnage was 329 tons. She had been built in Deptford Dockyard in 1791 by Martin Ware to a design by Sir John Henslow. She too would sadly have a short career, being broken up in 1803. Colnett's task was to undertake an inspection of coastal defences from the Thames to the Wash. He was to direct the erection of batteries in liaison with the Board of Ordnance, and his detailed letters to the Ordnance Board can still be viewed at the Public Record Office. In September 1796, he was appointed to the command of the brand new experimental 24-gun HMS Dart. the sister ship of the Arrow, on which his friend Nathaniel Portlock was serving in the North Sea at the time. Dart was built in Redbridge by Hobbs and Hellyer to the strange design of Samuel Bentham. However, Colnett's stay on the ship proved short, and he was finally promoted to the rank of post-captain on the 5th of October 1796. Colnett immediately shifted to his new command, the Enterprise-class 9-pounder frigate HMS Hussar of 28 guns. Built in 1784 in Sandgate in Kent, of 120-foot length on deck and 596 tons, she was Colnett's biggest command to date. She had a crew of 200 men. However, the command proved short-lived, and after a single convoy to bring in a fleet of East Indiamen, the ship was wrecked near the Ile de Bats on the 27th of December, whereupon he and his surviving crew became prisoners of the French. During their captivity, they were only allowed meagre provisions and were marched to various prisons, ending up in Pont-à-Mousson. Colnett was eventually exchanged after 6 months in captivity under the Ceres cartel. He requested his own court-martial for the frigate's loss and was acquitted aboard HMS Tribune on the 27th of June 1797. But he nevertheless remained unemployed for the next 5.5 years despite the heightening war. This was probably due to a combination of poor health and the after effects of the imprisonment and the stress from the loss of his ship. However, letters to his patron at the Admiralty, the Secretary Philip Stevens, seeking employment still exist from 1798. During this absence from active service, Colnett spent some time working on his journals from his previous voyages, and self-published a work entitled A Voyage to the South Seas, recounting his voyage on the Rattler. This was published in 1798 with the assistance of the chartmaker Mr. Aaron Erasmith. Within the book, Colnett discusses his treatment for the crew suffering from yellow fever, from which he had nearly died during his captivity by the Spanish. He makes a particular note that no patient seemed to suffer twice from the disease. In September 1802, Colnett received what was to be his final command. He took over the 54-gun converted East Indiaman HMS Glatton from his close friend Captain Portlock. Glatton had been built by John Wells at Blackwall in 1795 and was completing a major refit at Chatham at the time he took command. Colnett sailed from Portsmouth for New South Wales with a crew of 170 men, including 37 Marines. Her usual complement would have been 343. However, in addition, there were 270 male convicts and 170 females, along with some emigrants for the colony. The intention was to bring back a timber cargo for the dockyards. The journey there and back was planned to be completed in a year, but ended up taking over 18 months. The Glatton reached Port Jackson the following March, after a voyage that was remarkably free from illness due to the preventive measures Colnett had employed. Despite these, 14 prisoners still died, largely from pre-existing illnesses and malnutrition suffered before the voyage. On arrival in Sydney, Colnett became very disenchanted with the new colony, believing it badly situated and poorly managed. He fell out with Governor Philip Gidley King, who seemed to try everything in his power to delay the departure of the Glatton. Gidley King was himself struggling to retain authority over the rebellious Rum Corps. The local militia was in fact the letters written by Colnett that were to lead to King's governorship being recalled. Gidley King was to be replaced by William Bligh, who was sent with the strict instructions to reform the local economy and break the militia's control over the rum trade. While in Sydney, Colnett also appears to have tried to get one of the female convicts pardoned, as she had helped in preventing a mutiny on board amongst the convicts. She may, it seems, have been also cohabiting with Colnett on the voyage out. It seems that Governor King refused to grant a pardon, and this may have contributed to the animosity between the two captains. Once finally released, the Glatton sailed, and by September 1803 she was back in the Downs, having returned via Cape Horn in record time, with the ship's timber cargo that had been requested by the Admiralty. An acknowledgement of Colnett's achievement came when, shortly after his return home, he was invited to dinner by the Prime Minister, William Pitt, to discuss the future of the colony and its issues. After the ship's return, Glatton was to spend a brief period as flagship to Rear Admiral James Vachon at the Nore in 1804, acting as a guard ship and organising convoys. However, the Glatton and her captain were finally paid off on the 7th of March 1805. Colnett did not see any further service, and he died in his lodgings in Great Ormond Street, London, on the 1st of September 1806. He was buried at St Dunstan's Church in Stepney, the parish from where his father had originated. Colnett had never married. However, his will left the majority of his estate, valued at £5,000, to his sole remaining natural daughter, Elizabeth Caroline Colnett. For some reason, although named in the will, her mother, Catherine Ault, received nothing. Catherine had borne him 2 daughters. Sadly, only one of them lived past the date of his father's death. Colnett's legacy was to leave us with 4 journals from his Pacific voyages. However, he is largely forgotten, possibly due to him never having commanded a ship in battle. The fall from favour of colonial expansion, and in particular the devastating effects of the indigenous population from Chinese immigration, smallpox and other diseases, may be a further reason. Nevertheless, the charts he left us are a worthy reminder of his talents. I hope you have enjoyed this, and thank you for listening.